Hello, everyone.
Hi, guys. Thank you all so much for joining. I can see more people coming into the theatre. And thanks for joining on this software. Some of you may never have seen our Rome Theatre before, but this is your place to have a great evening of football. No, not tonight. That's off in the background. I know there is a big game going on tonight, but we're here to have a bit of a think about children and young people. But just before we do any proper introductions, at the bottom of your screen, you might see some different icons, different logos. That's the way that you can interact with us. So if there is something you like, give us a thumbs up. If there's something you want to ask, pop it into the chat. If there's something that you want to think about, then you just need to let us know. Over to you, Ruby.
Yeah. Hi, everyone. Welcome to our Big Changes and Big Feelings webinar tonight. My name is Ruby, and I'm going to be supporting Daniel in going through all of the content this evening and asking many of your very important questions. So we've got a lot of content to be covering, and some of that will span across anxiety and emotional well-being, managing big feelings and outbursts and behavioral changes, to balancing routine and structure across the summer holidays, and then all the way to friendship, social confidence, thinking about what to do when your children say they're bored, and many different scenarios like that, but also preparing children and young people for their new adventures, their new transitions, whether it's a new school year, a new school, whether it's a change from reception to year 1 or year 6 to year 7. We're going to be looking at all of that. So many of your pre-submitted questions will appear like this throughout the webinar. But we've also interwoven your comments and your questions into the content as well to make this hour as meaningful as possible for you. So Dr. Daniel Weisberg is a consultant clinical psychologist and the managing director of Cape Psychology. So we're really lucky to have an hour of his time tonight, and we hope that you benefit greatly from this session with us.
Oh, thanks so much for such a lovely introduction. Yeah, Ruby, thank you. I'm Dan. Dr. Daniel Weisberg's the official title. Dan tonight. I think that's absolutely fine. But my job as a clinical psychologist is to get the best possible understanding of what's going on for children. That's our role, and we do that through many different ways, therapies and assessments and all sorts of work, which I'll take you through in a second. But tonight it's our webinars to share as much information with you as possible. Just to let you know about Cape Psychology. So Cape Psychology is a child clinical psychological healthcare service. We offer psychological support for children and young people all the way up to 18 through whatever psychological difficulties they may be experiencing. So often that might be anxieties, mood changes, adjustments in their life. We also support parents through those journeys as well. But we're really proud to offer some specialist assessments too for autism, ADHD, learning and development and progression, learning difficulties, as well as supporting families if they're struggling with EHCP queries, tribunals, and managing the SEND tribunal system. And of course, we are here to support you as parents. That's our job, and this webinar is one of the ways that we're going to do that.
Yeah, absolutely. So some of the questions that you guys asked are here on the screen. So how do I balance maintaining routine whilst allowing my child to recharge over the holidays, all through to anxiety, and how to help deal with upcoming changes? So we've got 5 sections tonight. And the first section is understanding anxiety and emotional well-being during periods of change. So we're going to start right away with a question, which is, how best do I keep some kind of routine while still creating a holiday experience?
This is a great question, because holidays change everything, don't they? We've all been through it, we've all seen it, and it is a big change that's coming up. And I wonder if it's helpful for us to step back and look at the difference here between a schedule and a structure. And that's the messages that have just come up here is thinking about these two things differently can help make sure that we think about the summer in the positive ways: freedom, family time, new experiences, holidays, opportunities, but also challenges for everybody, because there is less routine, there is more uncertainty, friendships change, social stuff changes, September's coming where there's a big event going on as well. So there is lots of changes, which is equal in measure of excitement, but also overwhelming, and that can be sometimes quite difficult for some children. So thinking about the difference of a schedule and a structure is something that we'll think about a bit further, because that can help us think about it together. Why do transitions feel difficult? Because this is a really important way to consider anxieties and transition and change, because anxiety thrives off uncertainty. If you want to create the perfect conditions for where anxiety breeds, you need a bit of uncertainty and a bit of worry, and then you mix them together and you have got a real challenging set of circumstances potentially on your hands. Because children's brains and adults' brains are constantly wanting to know what happens next, or what if we don't know the answer. And the moment we're into what ifs, we're thinking about the worst possible thing that could happen. And the worst possible thing is, oh my gosh, school, what's it going to be like? I've got no friends, I'm going to fail. That's a potential for us to think about. So there are lots of unknowns here, and often the unknowns are scarier than actually the event itself, but it's much harder to say that directly to children.
Definitely.
So before we think about how those transitions have a big impact, I think understanding anxiety is a great place for us to start, because anxiety is normal. Everybody gets it. I think anxiety has a really bad reputation as being something that is terrible and you cannot experience. Whereas actually, I don't agree with that at all. Everyone gets anxious about something at some point. And actually, anxiety has evolved over time because it tells us, it's a bit of a warning light to say something's going on. We need to keep safe. So if we are faced with those conditions that breed anxiety, say uncertainty, our brains look for what the possible threats are. So what could that issue possibly be? Where could that go wrong? What on earth's going on here? Even if there is no danger present. So our job as parents isn't to eliminate anxiety. So the don't worries, stop worrying, that's not helping, is often not the best way for us to go about it. We all say it, of course we do, myself included, but that might not necessarily be the best way to go about it. Our job as parents is to help children recognize their anxiety and feel confident enough to face it, not to eliminate it. And so the best way to overcome anxiety is to work through the anxiety, not avoid it. So that process helps us to normalize anxiety and help us to develop the skills of working through. I absolutely accept, by the way, we're sitting here in a nice quiet space where it's easier said than done, but that's the aim for us to work on.
Yes, and with that, we're going to be talking about practical strategies that you can implement right away, because we're aware of how difficult this is. So thinking about heightened emotions as well.
So as we said before, anxiety is the little warning light, something's going on here. But then if that warning light takes a big step forward into the fire alarm, where it's now gone into the danger mode, that's where big anxieties can occur. And that's those where you might see those meltdowns, those outbursts, and that overwhelm of emotion, because the brain's emergency smoke alarm has been triggered. The moment that happens, the brain makes a big change. The change is the thinking, logical, rational part of a brain that we can sit here right now and sit and talk about. That is offline. It's not working and it's not accessible. That child at that time is in one of the 3 Fs, or actually sometimes there's 4. The fight, flight, freeze, and fawn is often seen as the 4th one, where your body responds in one of those ways. And so the logic, the consequences, the information giving, the lectures will not work. It's the equivalent I often see as telling someone who's drowning to swim. Like, that's exactly what they need to do. You need to swim, but you can't in that moment. So this is not a child being difficult or being disruptive or being troubling. This is a child who's really struggling. Interestingly, when it comes to anxieties, is children borrow is a great word, our nervous systems. So children learn skills of emotional regulation through, get ready for it, calm, connected adults. Now, we are all ideally wanting to be calm and connected. And I think every single one of us here can put our hands up and say, we are not always calm and connected, myself included. Did I lose it at my kids the other day? Absolutely, I lost it at my kids the other day. Did it help? No. So we're in a situation where it's going to happen. It's normal. But the most important part here is when adults feel calm, children feel safer. Children feel that there is a connection. And actually, we were talking about this just before. This happens for adults. Do you remember when it was coronavirus? Oh my gosh, we're going back all those years. No one knew what was going on. We know now, but back then, no one knew what was happening. So you look for adults to tell you what to do. And when Boris Johnson, I'm not supporting Boris here, but when Boris Johnson comes on stage and tells us for that very first time, guys, it's going to be okay, then we're sat there going, great, because we feel safe and secure. And then do you remember when he went into hospital because he contracted coronavirus, the rates of anxiety within the UK shot up because we don't have that connected, calm person. We're talking in hindsight here. So the message here is not Boris Johnson. The message here is children don't need perfect parents. And we'll talk more about what perfect means in a minute. But what children need is emotionally available ones most of the time.
Yep. So thinking about that, and one of the questions was, I tried to balance work and childcare over the summer, but I end up completely burnt out. And we saw this a lot in your pre-submitted questions. So Daniel and I have been speaking about how can you create that balance to be more sustainable and be calm, as we've just been speaking about.
But I mean, this is the real world, isn't it? And the real world is we work, parents work and parent and look after the house and manage X, Y, and Z. And over the summer term, we've all experienced this with kids at school. You've got sports day, this, trip, that, holiday, this, don't forget that kit. It's too much. It's too much for us. So we feel completely overwhelmed. And so I think if we strive for that perfectionism, we strive for things being absolutely perfect, that's what drives burnout. That's not possible. That's not sustainable. So trying to create huge jam-packed full activities over the summer is probably not going to work. Actually, I wonder if creating a sustainable balance means actively lowering our expectations. So we don't have to create the perfect summer. Children do not need constant entertainment and stimulation. Actually, doing less can sometimes create more meaningful moments together. Not always, but that certainly can be the case.
Yeah, absolutely. So thinking about co-regulation as well, we were speaking about that just earlier, but we wanted to just explain a bit more about the theory.
So co-regulation is that meeting each other at different places. So if we are calm and children are really heightened, if we stay calm, the co-regulation is them calming back down to your level over time. It can work the other way. If you're up here, children can meet you there, or vice versa. But children are barometers. They pick up senses, they recognize emotions, and so they will meet you at your emotion where you get to. So the bit to remember here is that does not mean you have to be calm 100% of the time, every single moment of every single day. Actually, hiding every single emotion is probably not that helpful. The most important thing here is repairing it when it goes wrong and then reconnecting. So if you do have an outburst at your kids, I can absolutely talk from experience here, then the outburst actually isn't the problem. The problem is not correcting it, and correcting it is later on when things have calmed down. We can go in and say, I'm sorry, that was my fault. I was upset. I've got a lot going on. I don't like getting upset like this. Let's have a hug and a cuddle. I'm really sorry. So it's an important thing for children to see that we get it wrong. Absolutely, we get it wrong. And that is a phrase that I think is really important here, that parenting has to be good enough. And you can say, what does good enough actually mean? Well, good enough for me, well, not just for me, good enough for the theorists is that you have to be available emotionally, physically, and ideally 30% of the time. 30%, that's it. Now, it doesn't mean for 30% of the time you're with your kids and 70% you run away. It just means that's all children need in order to feel safe and secure. And so most of the time, that's what we're going to be offering. So absolutely, you are good enough. That's what is going on for your children. And this is about the expectations we were talking about. There is a pressure to create the perfect summer. We're all on social media. I try not to be, but you do see it. You see pictures of families doing amazing family things. Oh my gosh, that family have climbed a mountain in Uganda and built an orphanage whilst blindfolded. Like, it's amazing stuff that they're doing. And you sit there going, oh my gosh, I'm sat here in my garden. But children don't need constant entertainment. And you know what you're doing as a parent is absolutely the right thing for them. So yes, there might be activities, but the most important thing psychologically is connection, predictability, time to rest, time to be bored, time to just sit and be. That's okay. And so this is what we said before, meaningful moments can come from doing a bit less.
Absolutely. So we spoke a bit about an exercise that we don't have time to do today, but we'd like you to think about doing in your spare time. So think about the ideal summer and then which of those things really matter, and removing about 30% of all of those demands. So we hope that you can take this exercise and do it in your own time and that it's useful for you. So thinking now about 3 ideas to remember throughout the webinar.
So these are great questions throughout this webinar, of course, but also moving forward as well. If you can keep in mind these ideas, I think this can help you create that structure yourself. So how can I make these moments feel more predictable? Predictability is children know what's coming next, what's going to be happening, that doing one thing will lead to another thing. Predictability is the opposite of uncertainty. So it's a really grounding, safe place for children to be. How can I stay connected with my children? So how can I interact with them, even if they're doing things that I just don't get and I don't understand? How do we make that connection? And how can I make my child feel the 3 magical C's: capable, confident, competent? And what can I do to help improve those? We will certainly come to those, but I think these 3 ideas underpin every single thing that we're going to be talking about next.
So section 2 now, understanding anxiety, big feelings and behavior. And we're going to start by explaining how anxiety doesn't always look like anxiety.
And that might sound like a really weird thing to say, but actually it's a really important point, isn't it? Because children don't always say, I'm feeling anxious. No child, please correct us if you're wrong in the chat here, but I'm very sure that no child has come up to you and going, hello, mother, hello, father. Today I'm feeling a little bit dysregulated and anxious and I need some help. Chances are you will see it through some form of emotion or behavior. And that is anger or outbursts or withdrawal or perfectionism. With school, you might see a resistance to wanting to go to school, wanting to get dressed, not wanting to go to bed, not behaving in a way that you would expect your child to in certain situations. You might even see some physical reactions: stomach aches, headaches, sweating. And these are genuine, real symptoms and real signs, but without a medical cause. And chances are that has an anxiety underlying it. So that often the first thing that we see is not what is spoken, it's what is seen, it's the behavior.
And feel free in the chat to share how your child may represent with anxiety that doesn't look like anxiety, as I can see some people are already now sharing their own experiences. So thinking about this question of how do I get my child to open up and talk to me about their fears and anxieties?
So I think it's, we get this a lot as psychologists, certainly, but we all get it as parents, which is, why doesn't my child talk to me? Why don't they tell me what's going on? If only they said what was happening, then I'd be able to help. But let's think about when you pick your children up from school, or they come home after a day at school, and you say, how was school? Or what did you have for lunch? Or what did you do today? And you've got a grunt or a don't know, whatever, shut up. You might get a response that essentially says, I'm not able to tell you. And we're sat there going, oh my gosh, why don't they talk to us? And it's a common trap to expect children to sit down and say what's going on. So children don't always say that, especially younger children, certainly the case for older children too. But I wonder if there isn't the emotional vocabulary yet to be able to identify or to verbalize complex feelings, or they're so overloaded from the day that sitting and talking about it back at home is on the very bottom of their to-do list. And so I think we can remember that behavior is communication. Behavior is communication. What is that behavior trying to tell us? Anxiety can often look like anger or the outburst or the withdrawal that we talked about. But before we can get them to open up, if we start listening to their behaviors, oh gosh, that's a psychological phrase if there ever was one, listen to their behaviors. What's their behavior trying to tell you? Then we can say, what might my child be trying to tell me? And then we're in a much better place to then start to work through it.
Yeah, absolutely. So I know you've just touched on this. Behavior is communication, but do you want to add anything else about that?
Yeah, but this is just the text about what we just said, isn't it? The behavior might be communicating anything because we might not always know what it is. It's about being overwhelmed, about being worried, not knowing what the expectations are. Something might have happened that we don't even know is a thing. But this is potentially children saying something's going on and I need a bit of help.
So thinking about helping children to return back to that calmness.
So if we want to help in these moments and we can't do it through simply words and talking, well, how do we do it? The first step is we have to come out of that emotional zone. Do you remember before we said when children are in that emotional smoke alarm stage, things can get too overwhelming. The logic, the rational, the sensible outcomes is almost impossible to access. So in that moment, we have to just bring back the calmness. We have to remove that emotion. Again, easier said than done, but to be able to get there, less is more. It's another psychological phrase, isn't it? Less is often more. So sitting and talking about it is not going to be the answer, but just being nearby, being present, being calm, even reducing that language is really helpful. It is conveying a very strong message that says, I am here, I'm with you, I get it, I understand. And if they're up for it, you put a nice arm around them, give them a little cuddle, and just very gently demonstrate that you are available and that you are present. And if you can keep that regulation, your children can also feel much more regulated. And we can validate those emotions as well, which I think this might mention here. The validation is really important here because just one generation ago, emotions were often dismissed. So if someone's upset, particularly boys, if someone's upset, it's don't cry, don't worry, you're going to be okay. We go straight to the fixing response. And that's all that we know needs to happen because just this is what you need to do in order to not feel like this. But in that moment, children can't access that. And so if we validate that emotion first, we recognize that the children recognize that we are with them and that we get it. And the validation comes from a great psychological tool, wondering. Psychologists love to wonder, and you can do it as parents. If you wonder about what's going on, you're essentially guessing what's happening, although you might know what's happening without telling them what's happening. So for example, I can hear that you're telling me you hate school. I know you don't want to go, but I wonder if you're actually really worried about it. There's a lot of change coming. And if that was me, I'd be nervous too. Something like that hasn't asked them a question. You've not expected anything from them. You've just hypothesized what you think might be going on through this really gentle wondering, naming the emotion and allowing children just to give you a nod or a head shake or something that gives you maybe that little inroad to say, I'm here, I'm with you, I've got you.
Yeah. So moving on to section 3, creating a summer that supports well-being. So firstly, thinking about structure, not schedules.
And this is where we started before. And I think this is the main bulk of why many of us have joined today, because the summer is the opposite of structure, isn't it? And there might be times where you're away for a week or perhaps a bit longer, or you might have an activity or a day out or something like that. But the general pattern is we're sat staring down the barrel of 6 to 8 weeks of, oh my gosh, and what are we supposed to do at this point? But remember these psychological ideas. Children benefit from structure, so knowing what to expect, knowing what's coming. Predictability, so feeling safe and secure. That's essentially knowing where I'm going to be sleeping at night, knowing who's going to be around the next day. And flexibility, which is allowing that time to rest and explore and enjoy summer. So children benefit from all of these. There is a psychologist who says children especially primary school children, should not go on holiday, because it is the opposite of structure and predictability. Now, I do not subscribe to this way of thinking. I actually think the benefits of holidays are, even if it's a day over about 10 minutes down your road, then that is hugely beneficial for children. And the benefits certainly outweigh the positives, but it's about creating that structure and predictability without being too rigid. And again, let's go back to coronavirus. Do you remember when that started? I don't know if any of you joined that Facebook group that appeared, that children's lockdown activities, family lockdown group or something like that. It got like 1 million people in about 10 minutes because everyone's like, oh my gosh, what am I supposed to do? And people are uploading these unbelievable pictures of exceptionally rigid schedules. 7 a.m. wake up, 7:05 brush your teeth, 7:09 have your breakfast, whatever it is. And I'm sat there going, it looks amazing, but it is never going to happen. It is too structured, it is too rigid, and of course it fizzles out. So the bit that children and families will benefit from is not hourly planning, but just maybe 2 or 3 specific anchor points that are consistent throughout every day as much as possible. For example, a similar morning routine. It's the same sort of thing. We wake up at the same time. We then have the same routine for teeth, breakfast, shower if you need in the morning, get whatever it might be. But it's that structure can be really helpful. Having food at the same sort of times, breakfast, lunch and dinner roughly at the same times. And then that bedtime routine that's at that predictable wind down time. Now, again, we're talking generally here. Look at the World Cup that's on at the moment. It is exceptionally annoying to have these games kick off at 8 p.m. is hard enough, but 10 p.m., 2 a.m. last night, and kids who aren't even that interested in football are like, I've got to be up because their friends might be up. And I actually just saw a post come up before on, oh my gosh, I sound like I'm all over Facebook the whole time. I'm really not. But a post came up of people with their kids. And in fact, there was one on BBC News, wasn't there, of these kids at 4 a.m. being like, yeah. And I'm like, great, have fun. But what it's doing is it is showing that that's the right thing to do. And so other kids see it, other kids want to do it. And suddenly your predictable bedtime, which I suspect doesn't include being awake at 4 a.m., is suddenly thrown out of whack. Things change, of course they do, but the general pattern is a general consistency. And to throw it into absolute chaos, let's think about the S word, screens, because screens are one of the biggest things that's going on for all families at the moment. Of course it is. Now, I am not a psychologist who's against screens. Absolutely not. I think the benefits of screens are huge, but I think it has to be managed as in the best possible ways. And of course we get it wrong. Of course we do. The general pattern is what I think we need. And we've got to recognize that screen time over the holidays absolutely jumps in terms of the numbers of hours on a screen. But we've been primed. I don't know where this has come from. I don't know if it's a British thing or just a human thing. We have been absolutely primed to be talking about the number of hours on a screen. Oh, you've had 2 hours today, 5 hours is acceptable, 10 hours, or whatever it is. The number of hours is almost irrelevant. It's not totally irrelevant, but actually it's the bit on screens is doing something for children. We'll have a think about that in a second. But the big thing for me as a psychologist is how you get them off screens. Because again, a bit like before when we talked about how many of your children say, I'm anxious, how many of your children will, when you say, please turn that off, turn around and go, okay, Dad, here's my iPad. It doesn't happen. It's, oh, just 1 more minute. I'm nearly done. Let me just carry on. Oh, not just yet. Oh, everyone else is on it. There's always an excuse for it. And it's annoying. It's really annoying, but it's there because coming off those screens is a big change, a real change. It's not just a change from fun activity to bedtime, which is one part of it, but it's a neurobiological change as well. It's a change from high dopamine, which is that feel-good chemical. I'm enjoying myself. This is great. I'm competent at this. Children on Roblox and Minecraft are usually amazing at Roblox and Minecraft. So they feel great. And they know that coming off that screen is a cliff edge drop of that dopamine. And children know that will come. So coming off that screen will feel bad. So they're not going to want to give it up easily. And I wonder, bit of wondering there for you, is if there a way of bridging that gap somehow? And again, it doesn't always work, but just this idea of trying to reduce that cliff edge drop of dopamine to no dopamine. How can we sort of share this transition? How can you be with them? Because what I often do in my house is stand at the top of the stairs going, turn that bloody thing off, get upstairs, 5 times I've told you. And it never helps, never, ever helps. What actually would be really beneficial is to be sitting with my children and engaging with them for a 5-10 minute sort of transitional time to say, oh, you're amazing at this. I'm so impressed with how well you can do this Minecraft stuff. I mean, I have no idea what they're doing. I don't get Roblox. I don't understand these things that they do, and the conversations that they have is literally another language for me. But if you can show some interest into their world, there is a curiosity in what they're doing. It massively helps that transition away from that screen into perhaps something a bit more of a shared low pressure activity, which might be doing a puzzle, taking a walk somewhere, doing some drawing, doing some colouring. My daughter's writing song lyrics at the moment, which I don't know where that comes from, but it's amazing to see something that is just gently coming away from screens, and it all comes from that connection with your kids. And if you can make that happen, which is again easier said than done, that's a real benefit.
So I'm seeing in the chat a lot of people say they're struggling with screens, and we got a lot of questions about screens. So one of the questions was, my son uses screen time to regulate, but he is quite obsessed with it. How can we achieve a good balance, especially during the summer?
Yeah, this is why I think screens are really interesting to think about, because screens again have a reputation of being just bad. The more children are on it, the worse the outcomes, and I don't think that's the case. The benefits of screens can be huge, especially for many children who are regulated by screens. Actually, being on a screen brings calmness. We know it has stimulating properties in children's brains. It absolutely does. And it has the same effect on those children's brains for sleep as it would for children who might not feel regulated by a screen. But for children who need a screen to regulate, it can be a very powerful tool. And so how do we get that balance is a constantly changing dynamic. If we can shift our attention away from the number of hours that they're on it, which is what we are thinking about, onto some form of transition, other ways of thinking about the moving away from it, that can always be a good way. It's really difficult to get that good balance. And there'll be days where we don't manage it. Of course there is. But we have to show that we're interested in them, that we're engaged with them. We want to do stuff with them that might be within their interests. And it's a great way of moving away from that screen. And then the magical phrase, Ruby, isn't it? I'm bored. I'm bored. Oh my gosh, how many times have we heard this? Literally, my daughter goes to gymnastics and she's just done, I don't know, 4 hours of tumbling and running and jumping, and then coming out, I'm bored. It's like constantly needing stimulation to do something and to engage with something. But boredom isn't always something that we need to fix immediately, because boredom actually is a real opportunity to open doors for something creative, for problem solving, for independence, for using imagination. So great, you're bored, amazing, go and find something that we know that you like doing. And that could be drawing, an activity, it could be Lego, it could be making something, but it's not going to come from you saying, oh, you need to go and do this. It needs to come from your children. And one way to potentially introduce this is almost like a menu, you know, like in a restaurant, there's a menu of food. Well, what if we had an activity menu? So we have a boredom menu, or an activity menu, whatever you want to call it, with a whole list of different activities. And if children keep saying, I'm bored, I'm bored, I'm bored, great, let's get the menu. And you pull out the menu and you together can say, right, should we give this a go? Oh my gosh, we didn't do this last time. Let's give this a try. And it allows children to have autonomy. It can reduce a bit of conflict because they feel in control. They've made that choice. You might get a complete opposite reaction. But it's just an idea as a way of trying to navigate that I'm bored phrase.
Yeah. So one of the questions with that is, how do I deal with big feelings around boredom? We think it's important not to regiment the summer, but our son responds best to this.
Yeah. It's so common, isn't it? So,
Mm.
especially for children who thrive on routine, to have huge emotional reactions to them being bored. As parents, our instinct is to often jump in and fix it, so that big feeling stops. Oh my gosh, we need to stop this. But actually, I think we need to remember that boredom isn't something we need to fix immediately, just as we've been saying. When a child who's used to a very regimented day suddenly faces an unstructured afternoon, that can be dysregulating. And as we've discovered, dysregulation can lead to these big feelings that children might not yet have developed the skills to deal with. But those feelings are simply saying that child's brain is not got a plan. I'm out of control. I need a bit of help here. So our goal is not to suddenly go back to that rigid schedule just to keep the peace. But can we help our children tolerate that space? Can we learn to deal with that feeling of boredom? Yes, it's rubbish. Yes, it's horrible. And yes, there's nothing to do, but allowing them to tolerate it so that we can then develop that creativity, problem solving skills, that imagination to then go and do something.
Mm.
Siblings, Siblings. Siblings are a wonderful thing, but siblings are in exactly the same measure catastrophic because sibling dynamics can be really difficult, especially when that pressure rises, and pressure rises from things that sometimes we cannot control. The heat, when we're all hot over the last few weeks, the heat, we become more irritable, and that is shown within siblings certainly. Smaller spaces, like the back seats of a car, like the moment you have two kids sat next to each other, they suddenly become almost impossible to be together. So these things certainly are reactions to whatever's going on in that environment. There's lots of strategies that we can think about. Again, some might be helpful, some might not work for your family, but one that's often thought about as being a very powerful one is something called sibling safe zones. Oh my gosh, it sounds like a proper army thing, doesn't it? Paintballing and safe zones. But actually, it's just about saying these are spaces that are controlled by me, done in my way. And so sometimes a visual indicator can be good, like a traffic light system. Children can put traffic lights on their door for red, amber, and green to sort of say, I am not available. Maybe if you knock and I'm ready to talk, or yep, come on in. Or certain areas that can have color codes where other siblings can go, and we all agree it together. So it's an agreed plan. Or similarly, thinking about something like a decision rota, which essentially says, for especially for minor things that are prone to bickering, like who's got the big plate, or who holds the remote control, or who sits in a certain seat. Well, actually, what if we were to say that today is Monday? Sarah, you can have that day. You make the decisions here. Or Sarah, you get 5 decisions today that you're in charge of. Tomorrow is your brother's day. It's going to be Leo who says what's going on. And so it's just micro decisions for that day that they feel more in control of, because remember, control is one of the things that breeds comfort and certainty. So if we can allow children to feel autonomous in their decision making, it can really help. Often when it comes to children making decisions, remember, we're the parents here. So often we want to try and guide them in the right direction, which might mean if you give children a decision, make sure the decisions are both things that you want. Do you want a bath with bubbles or a bath without bubbles? They're still having a bath. Do you want the fish fingers on going horizontally or vertically? I don't think any parent has ever said that. I don't know where that came from, but you know the idea. You're essentially saying, here are the 2 outcomes that I want. You choose.
Absolutely. So thinking about section 4, so preparing for a successful September. So the best time to prepare for September isn't the night or the week before school. It's through small, manageable steps over the summer, which is why we wanted to do this session now, weeks and weeks before September starts. So starting this section with preparing for September starts before September.
It does. It absolutely does. Yeah. Every Christmas, Martin Lewis, the money saving expert guy, he always does a program about money saving tips, and every single Christmas he says the same thing, which is, now that Christmas has finished, and like Christmas has barely finished, it's still going on, but now that Christmas Day is over, Now go and buy all of your Christmas stuff for next year, wrapping papers and the cards and that sort of stuff. And that is a great idea. It's great. And that is preparation. And we all sit there and go, great idea. And very few of us actually do it. But the planning as much in advance is absolutely the right thing to do. And so if we know that September's coming and it is creeping towards us, the more preparation we can put into place, the better. Now, we've now got a handful of weeks before anything to do with school. And so we will often see a relaxing for children, a calming, because that anxiety isn't there. But as August sort of creeps through, we often see a rise in anxiety here. And you might see it, a slight increase in anxiety, that reassurance seeking of, how's it going to work on the next day? Sleep might start to change. Emotional outbursts. You might even get the words, I don't want to go back to school. I hate school. Those sorts of things. So anxiety, as we've said all throughout, grows in uncertainty. Preparation builds that confidence. And so the preparation is just that positive talk about what's going on, being honest about it. So if you don't know, it's okay to say, I don't know, but let's find out together. Maybe you can practice routines or focus on what your children can expect. And practicing routines might be getting dressed or the route to school. So for example, there are many children who'll be making that transition from year 6 to year 7. So we're not just changing years in school, we're changing schools. Can you do the route to school together? Can you work with them? I think we'll come on to that transitional thing.
So we're going to come on to that really soon, but one of the questions was, how can I support my anxious child with the transition to high school? And I know that we're going to be answering that really shortly.
The year 6 to year 7 change is the biggest time of change for children, and it almost comes at the worst point biologically as well, because often this is when children might be going through puberty. So you've got the biological changes, but it comes at the same time as social changes, academic changes. There is a huge big step up as well, on top of complete uncertainty. So having a think about that transition can come from preparation, talking about it, watching videos, looking at the uniform, get the school uniform out, put it on a hanger in front of hanging up on a wardrobe, visit the school if possible. There may be lots of transitional things that have already been put in place by school. And if over the summer school is shut, do the journey to school anyway. Go and have a look, stand at the school gates at the front and go and have a look where it is and what it looks like. It's just about getting used to it together. You can even practice putting on the school uniform, packing school bags together, even looking at photos of teachers. And if you are particularly concerned about how your child might manage that transition, tell the year 7 school, tell the pastoral team, the SEN team, and just let them know, because they will have seen this every single year and will absolutely have strategies and ideas and processes in place to try and make that process as easy as possible.
Yeah. So we're going to talk soon about how to communicate with the Senko and the new school about your child's needs. But firstly, we're going to talk about sleep.
Summer jet lag is this shift in sleeping times. And remember what we said before, that psychologist who says, don't go on holiday, that psychologist says it because of the main drive of this, which is changes in sleep. Because when sleep changes, it has a huge knock-on effect. And he's right with the power of sleep. Sleep is one of the most important things for children's regulation, and not necessarily the number of hours, actually, it's the quality of those hours. By far, sleep quality is the strongest predictor of good mental health, of good academic outcomes, of good social relationships. Sleep quality, good night's sleep. And we know that the summer holidays, especially World Cup summer holidays, will have a massive shift. And if you are going on holiday and you're crossing multiple time zones, that's compounded even further. So the way to try to get sleep back on track is not to do it on August 31st. 31 days in August. I need to count 30 September. I need to go back to school. Doing this the day before is never going to work, because you will not go from an 11:30 p.m. sleep to an 8 p.m. sleep overnight. But actually what we can do is think about gradually bringing sleep back 5 minutes, 10 minutes, very gradually from the middle or even potentially the start of August, very gently. And if you can gradually shift that sleep back bit by bit, that's a great way to get that preparation, and to try to reintroduce more structured screen time as well, because we know that screens might be used a lot at night, and screen time at night has the biggest impact on sleep quality. And we all do it. How many of us sat there last night lying in bed scrolling, just having a look? It's the worst thing that we can do for sleep quality. This is, of course,
yeah. So is there any tips for bedtime? His worries can affect his sleep, especially during the summer holidays. And I'm seeing a lot in the chat that people really struggle with sleep through summer, and even now at the moment, I think as it gets lighter and there's more things going on.
Yeah. But that Ruby, you've absolutely said it there. So bedtimes in the summer is the hardest time to sleep, because it's light outside.
Yeah.
Chances are you can hear other children still outside, or the smells of barbecues or whatever it might be. It's hot, and not many of us have got air conditioning. And of course, worries appear at bedtime. Like, it's absolutely fine during the day, but then bedtime is when children want to be able to then find their words for it. But often it is not because their worries suddenly appear at bedtime. Actually, delaying going to bed, remember, behavior is a communication. Delaying going to bed, what's it leading to? Well, it's delaying waking up the next day, because potentially the next day there is something going on that we're not sure about or a bit anxious about. So if we can try to think about what's this behavior communicating, then that's really helpful. And of course, getting the environment right is absolutely going to help. Calm, quiet, dark rooms is always the best place, but of course, it's not so easy in the summer holidays. And of course, friendships change over the summer, and friendships are so hard to navigate, especially for many anxious children, or children whose brains might work in a bit of a different way, children who don't fit the mold. And I do think we as a society are hugely changing here. There's so much more that we need to do. But that, you know, I see it at my own kids' school, where there is absolutely the group of kids who go about life in one particular way, and the group of kids who go about it in completely the other way. And year 5, year 6, year 7, year 8, that is the time when that really becomes much more amplified, and children know that it's happening. You know, when children are in that preschool reception year 1 age, social relationships doesn't matter, because everyone's all sort of just friends. Whereas when we get older, it can have a real impact, especially with the whole social media thing going on. And this social media ban will be really interesting for us to keep an eye on. But for many children, friendships is one of the biggest worries about returning to school, especially if you're going to a new school with not many people from your school. So can you maybe meet up with someone? Is there one person, just one, that you're able to meet, and that's all that you might need to have that connection with someone who feels safe and secure with you? Let's be honest about talking about friendship changes. Talk about when you moved from primary school to high school, or you changed years, or you were in a class where one of your friends left the school, for example. You can say how it upset you, and it was horrible, and you're naming and normalizing difficult emotions. And one thing that is always powerful for us to think about as well as parents is to say that it's the quality rather than quantity. I know that when I meet many children and families, one of the questions I ask, just to find out about how they navigate their social world, is tell me a bit about your friends. And for many children, the answer is, I've got loads. Everyone's my friend. And it's great. And I think it's absolutely lovely that children want to be seen with loads of friends. But the number of friends is absolutely not important. It's the quality of those friends. And sometimes reminding children that friendships change, and sometimes people don't want to talk, or sometimes people want more than what you can offer, and it can take time to develop. So friendships certainly change.
And with that, the first few weeks of school may feel harder, so we're going to talk about how that may look and how to support your child if that happens.
I mean, starting a new class, it's exciting, but it is also petrifying because you've got no idea where all the things are that you knew perfectly well just a few weeks before. So it takes a huge amount of mental and emotional energy, doesn't it? And there are many children who deal with that really well because they show that they're interested and that they're engaged, or actually maybe even they're just a little bit more quiet, they take a step back, but they're not showing any sort of sign that they're having any difficulty with these big changes. And this is this idea of masking, and masking can be social masking, that you're interacting with peers and friends and seem to be managing fine. There is an academic masking where you seem to be managing all of the demands of school really well, and there is the neurodivergent masking, which is when you're managing distressing environments like loud places, busy places, smelly places, and seem like you're managing perfectly well. And doing that is a brilliant strategy because it looks like you're doing great, but it is A, not sustainable, and B, is going to come out at some point, because it's like that Coke bottle, isn't it, Ruby, where you shake it and shake it and shake it. At some point, it has to explode. And often that explosion will be in the safest of places with the safest of people, which happens to be your house with you. And that's what we call this restraint collapse, or that after school explosion.
And that brings us as well to thinking about the mornings and having conflicts and stress before school and school refusal. So do you have any tips or insights into that?
And if children, I think this is such a good question, Ruby, because there are so many children who know that they have to work so hard to simply get through the school day.
Yeah.
And, you know, for children or adults who don't feel that and just get on with it, they're able to go to school and do school. But for many children who really struggle with it, their brains are full of so much information that makes just the learning that they probably want to do and probably can do brilliantly, but it makes that learning so much harder to engage with, and it's exhausting. So it is like you looking down, or looking up a huge mountain. You know you've got to get up there today, and sometimes children say, "Oh my gosh, that is too much," and rather than them saying, "I'm really struggling," as we've talked about, it's going to come out as behavior. I'm not going to school, I'm not getting out of bed, I'm not putting my clothes on, and that real, what looks like defiance. Do we have any tips? Of course, there's so many things that we can try, but it's going to be it's got to be personalized to your circumstances. So the first point is, why is this happening? Can we understand what this is about? And can we connect with it to be able to show that we get it, to try and help that transition through things? There unfortunately isn't an easy answer for it, because if it was easy, we wouldn't be asking this question, we'd be doing it. Many of the things that we try might work, it might not, but we have to try and think together about why this is happening. But there are certain things that we can put in place, particularly how can we help with that post-school collapse if children are holding it all together? Well, have some food. That whole hungry thing is a very real thing. Hungry children can almost stop functioning. So making sure that children have food immediately after school can be really powerful. And then at exactly the same time, go for a zero interrogations approach. And this applies for primary school children through to high school children. Is when they come through the door, or they get into your car, or you pick them up at the gate, the intuitive thing is, "Hi, how was your day? Oh my gosh, what have you made today?" That sort of stuff. Or did you make any friends? Or what have you eaten? Whereas actually, less is more. Zero interrogations. You can hand over the food, you can give them a big hug and a kiss, say, "It's lovely to see you," or "Lovely to see you," isn't that right? Whispering, "Lovely to see you," handshake. No, that's not what we want to do. We want to say, "I hope you had such a great day," but almost leave it there. Leave it there. And then when they get home, can we lower the sensory input at home? Can we have dimmer lights? Can the TV and radio or whatever it is be off? Can we allow them just to go to a space for 10 minutes just to be? And then they'll come out when they're ready. So essentially, you are there when they are ready.
And the sensory input as well. What do you think about that? Lowering the sensory input.
So lowering it, yes.
Yes.
I've never actually seen this before, although I have heard about it. And I saw this just last week. I went into Tesco, And I went in, I was like, I'm sure it's darker in here than it normally is. I didn't even clock it. And whilst I was there, the lights then lit up again. And I realized that this was the sensory hour, where they've reduced the sensory needs for neurodivergent brains, where people might be going in who struggle with bright lights, lots of people, lots of noise. Everything is quieter and calmer. And it was hugely noticeable, a massive difference. And so if we can copy something like that at home, again, easier said than done, that can be a really powerful experience.
So moving on to the final section before we finish this evening. So section 5, helping your child feel confident about September. So specifically about thinking about neurodivergent children through transitions and change.
Yeah. And we've mentioned neurodivergence and having practical, visible things to help can be really powerful here. Visual countdowns, calendars that you rip off, practicing routines, concrete language, none of this inference that we need. If it's rigid, fixed specifics, that can be really powerful, because we know children with autism and ADHD really benefit from that.
Yeah. So why are transitions so difficult for children who are neurodivergent?
So transitions are difficult for everybody. It's just the feelings are absolutely heightened, I think, for neurodivergent children. That change is so much harder to navigate. And sometimes it's really, especially when there is a rigidity or a fixation or obsessions over certain things, because doing those things is hugely rewarding with all of that dopamine, all of that feel good factor. For us to then stop it is a really overwhelming experience. And it's a neurodivergent brain that struggles with that so much more than perhaps a neurotypical one.
Okay, so thinking about working together with school.
So we mentioned this before, and that thinking about that transition from year 6 to year 7, but it's also the case for children who are staying within a school. If you feel that your child might be struggling or has already struggled and needs that little bit of guidance, absolutely get in touch with the Senko at school. Explain what's going on, and you can put down what schools often do. They make a one-page profile, but you can create one at home. So you can create a list of things that you know your child finds difficult or that they struggle with, for school to be aware of. That communication, that collaboration between school and home can be hugely powerful. If you can include what makes your child anxious, what are the signs for you for teachers to look out for, what helps them to regulate, and that even if it's a little bit of information, can be super powerful for schools, especially when this question's come up. If your child is masked quite a lot and school don't see the problem, so many of us sat here tonight will have heard schools say to you when they're here they're fine, or after a few minutes they're okay, and they might be settling in okay, and many children might be okay. They might just struggle a little bit with that breakaway or that separation from parents at the door, or that idea of going into school, and then settle perfectly fine. But there are many children, particularly neurodivergent children, who might then get into school and look fine, but they are not fine. And inside they're not fine. And if you're seeing that real overwhelming outburst at home, then chances are that's a big message to say they are not fine. So how can we bridge that gap between what you see at school and home? Sometimes psychologists like ourselves can help with that, but talking to school is absolutely the way about it.
So thinking about building confidence one small step at a time.
Yeah. Confidence is such a wonderful idea, that I would love so many more children to be confident, but you can't just give confidence to children. It's something that is seen by trying something new, by solving a problem, by experiencing failure, experiencing things go wrong, and talking about it and working through it. That old adage of falling off a bike, well, you get back up and get yourself going again. Something will go wrong, and so what can we learn from it, and how can we work through it? And that can be doing something brand new, but it can also be something much smaller, trying a new food, playing independently, asking for help, being brave enough to ask someone for something. And these successes are the things that children use to believe that they can cope with bigger challenges. Small steps can absolutely do wonders for confidence, one step at a time.
This was just an example of how you could support your child building confidence. So creating your own mild, relatable worry and asking your child for support and some advice, and then reflecting that advice back to them when they're struggling as well. And we've only got a few minutes left, so we just wanted to summarize and also tell you a bit about when we think it's worth looking for some more specialist support.
Yeah. And so the things that we've talked about all the way through this is what children do need. And what children do need is predictability, connection, opportunities to celebrate successes. Oh, it's so lovely. And for adults and for parents to believe that they are good enough and that they can cope with what's going on. What we don't need is perfection, perfect holidays, because that doesn't exist. And there are times when we might need a little bit of extra help. And so if you feel that your child might be struggling that little bit with anxiety that doesn't seem to be improving with the things that have been recommended for you, or that the time that you think they should have been able to manage this hasn't, the time that's passed hasn't resulted in things improving, you see distress appearing more at home, you see more resistance to going to school, difficulties that are becoming increasingly difficult for you to manage, well, then, yes, that might be when you can seek further support. And that can be via your GP. It can be via the school Senko. It can be via child and adolescent mental health services. Of course it can. It can also be done via us at Cape Psychology. We're an independent child psychology clinical, can't get my words out now, it's all this talking, a child clinical psychology healthcare service. So if you are concerned about your child for any of the things that we've talked about today, or perhaps something different, please be in touch, because our job isn't just to get loads of appointments booked in. Our job is to support you, and potentially that might mean just having a bit of time over the phone, having to think about what's going on, with a chance to talk about what the best next steps might be, which might be appointments, it might be assessments, but we certainly don't recommend anything unless we feel there is a clinical need for it. I think,
and it's just important to mention with that we have over 40 clinics across the UK with over 100 highly specialised clinicians who are all available to offer support. So with that, we just want to say a massive thank you for joining, and a huge thank you to Dr. Daniel Weisberg for his hour of wisdom and insights and strategies as well. So if you would like to follow us on social media, we will be telling you all about our upcoming events at cape.psychology, also our website, our WhatsApp, and our email if you would like to get in touch. We will put all of our information in the chat as well. We've also recorded this session, and we will send it to you all tomorrow, and you're welcome to share it and distribute it. So thank you so much, Dr. Weisberg.
Ruby, thanks so much. You've been absolutely brilliant as always. So everyone, back to the football. Go on and drag your kids away from the TV. Have a wonderful night. Thanks so much.
Bye, everyone. Thank you so much.
Take a breath and find your space. We are gathering in this quiet place. Welcome families from near and far. Step inside just as you are. We are glad